Okay, so hello everyone. I'm João Carlos Moreno de Sousa from the National Museum of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm going to present to you a little bit of the research I've been carrying out. Basically, what I'm going to present here is the current state of the art of what we know about the Paleoindian period in Brazil. And when we are talking about the Paleoindian period, we refer to the first settlements of Brazil. Well, in this case, the first settlements of America. In this case, I'm going to present just about Brazil. When we talk about the Paleoindian period, also known as Paleo-American, sorry, Paleo-American by some other researchers, we can think about the Paleoindian period in two different periods, and we can separate them between the early Paleoindian period, that are sites that are older than 15,000 years before present. The oldest ones date back to 14,000 years old. And we have sites that are in North America, in South America, in South America, specifically in Brazil. We have only two regions in Brazil that have evidence of this early Paleoindian occupation. And the lithic industries of these places are quite simple in technological terms. You have choppers and retouch flakes, and that's basically it. You have nothing more complex than that. And I'm not talking about these industries because I'm not researching them. I'm going to talk to you more about the late Paleoindian period, which was the first large-scale occupation of the continent. The oldest sites of this period, they date back to 14,000 years before present. Lithic artifacts of these industries, they are way more complex than before. There is some diversity in complexity of these industries. Some are more complex than others, but in general, they're all more complex than the previous industries of the early Paleoindian period. An interesting fact is that some Paleoindian lithic technologies, they disappeared during early Holocene, but some persist to late Holocene, which is very rare in the Paleoindian terms. When we talk about lithic technology in the American continents, we are used to see a lot of change through time, and this is not the case in some Brazilian lithic industries, as you're going to see. According to previous Brazilian archaeology literature, the oldest sites date to 14,000. They were not aware yet about the sites I told you before about the early Paleoindian, and they used to divide the Brazilian lithic industries in the Itaparica Tradition in the north and central Brazil, northeastern and central Brazil, and the Umbu Tradition, which gets all southeastern and southern Brazil and also gets whole Uruguay and nearby regions of Argentina and Paraguay. So 4 countries. About the Itaparica Tradition, you have seen the location in Central Brazil Plateau and Northeastern region, but the main features of this industry is the high presence of Lesmas. I'm going to explain what are Lesmas in a minute. And also another main feature is the total lack of bifacial production. You cannot see anything bifacial in this industry. Most recent research verified that there is some technological standard in the Itaparica Lesmas. So a lot of recent researchers were asking is Itaparica tradition a real thing? And some researchers are looking at this now, and it seems that there is actually this technological standard. So for now, we are attesting that Itaparica tradition is a thing, and we're calling this the Itaparica lithic industry. So what are the lesmas? Lesmas are scrapers with multiple active edges. The blank is always a flake. There's always a unifacial reduction, a plane convex section, and this elongated or ovalate shape. Well, lesmas are basically a specific type of limace. If you think on the old word limaces described by Barthes in the 60s in his typology studies. Most recently, we have identified another industry, that is the Lagoassantense Industry. And I'm going to show you the location in the map in a minute. But it's also in central Brazil. It's quite located in would be where it would be the limits, in the limits geographical region between the Itaparica and the Umbu traditions. The main features of the Lagoassantense industry is the high presence of microliths that are basically retouched crystal quartz flakes, very, very, very tiny flakes. Actually, they're very, you don't have much retouch in these crystal quartz flakes. They're very, very few retouches, and that's the general characteristic of these artifacts. You have also the presence of the oldest polished axe blades in the American continent. They're very few, but they're there. You have the lack of lesmas, they don't appear here in the Lagoassantense industry, as well as stemmed points and bifacial technology, which are common in other industries of the Paleoindian period in Brazil and Americas. And you can also identify the two debitage methods, core flaking, so the diagonal lysing and the opposite plane methods. Here you can see a little bit in the top left of the figure. You can see the flakes of crystal quartz that are barely retouched. There are lots of those. Most of them are actually not even retouched. And this is the main artifact of the Lagoassantense lithic industry. In the top at the right, you can see examples of two cores of two different methods. So the top one is the debitage slicing method, and the bottom one is the opposite plane method. They're very small because they are, well, ended. So you cannot remove any more flakes from this. And if you want to know more about these methods of debitage, you can ask me later in the discussion. And in the bottom of the figure, you can see two different blades, polished axe blades, the oldest ones in America. They're dated back to 11,000 years old. And finally, we are going to talk about the Umbu tradition, which is located in southern Brazil and gets those areas of Argentina, Paraguay, and the whole Uruguay, as you could see previously in the map. The main feature of this so-called Umbu tradition is the presence of projectile points. Actually, they're stemmed lithic points. Projectile points is how the archaeologists previously identified this tradition. And there is no other specification about how to define or how to identify sites and associate them to the Umbu tradition. So yeah, there's a problem here, right? Well, what are the problems with this Umbu tradition model? No lithic studies were ever made in order to verify if there is any cultural persistence that allow us to call it tradition until this decade. So if the Umbu tradition is a tradition, it should keep going on for a long time. Does it verify? So also no lithic studies were ever made in order to verify this claim homogeneity until this decade as well. So if you're talking about tradition that exists in all that region, we could identify cultural homogeneity in the artifacts. Yes, no. Also, archaeologists from Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina have never associated any lithic assemblage to the Umbu tradition. Only Brazilian archaeologists talk about Umbu tradition. Well, in the most recent studies in this Umbu tradition, Okumura and Araújo identified morphological differences between Paleoindian stemmed points from different regions. So, Okumura and Araújo identified different patterns of forms in the stemmed points that were related to Umbu tradition. So it goes against the Umbu model. Also, they observed that there is actually some stability in the stemmed points morphology at Garibaldino site, but still it's only one site that we could identify this tradition that actually keeps going on for a long time. And here we're talking about 8,000 years of people doing exactly the same things. If we look to the most recent research in the Uruguayan territory that would be related to Umbu tradition, we can see the research of Rafael Soares. He studied sites that are located near to the Brazilian border. He carried out technological analysis, and what he saw were cultural changes during early Holocene. So we found out that this place is also full of stemmed points, and he identified the fishtail points from the fishtail industry, or fell industry as it is also known. He identified another industry in another period that he called Tigre industry, and in the most recent dates he could identify the Peipasso industry. So he identified at least 3 different industries in that region in different times. It also goes against the Umbu tradition model. Now I'm talking about my PhD research, that I'm finishing right now. In March, I hope to defend my thesis with the professors in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro in the National Museum. It's called Point-to-Point Technology, Looking for Cultural Change During Holocene and Lithic Industries from Southeastern and Southern Brazil. So what's the hypothesis of this thesis? Is that all Paleoindian sites from the Umbu coverage area present stemmed lithic points, and they are culturally homogeneous. But what does technological data say about those stemmed points? Well, I analyzed 4 C14 dated Paleoindian sites: the Alicebar site, the Caetituba site, the Tunas site, and the Garibaldino site. So 2 are located in São Paulo State, 1 is located in Paraná State, and 1 is located in Rio Grande do Sul State. First, I'm going to talk about Caetituba site. It has dates that the oldest ones are 11,000 years old, a little bit more, and its occupation goes until at least mid-Holocene. We don't have C14 dates for these levels that are most recent than mid-Holocene. So we know that at least until mid-Holocene, there is an occupation there. We can find their stemmed points, as you can see at the left, and Lesmas, as you can see in the right. And you can see that the points are triangular body, they have this ovalate shape. This is the same that you're going to find out in Alicebar site in the same state, in the central part of this state, São Paulo State, which have earlier dates that they are middle Holocene, but you still have the same exact technology. You have the same exact points and the same Lesmas. And there are at least 4 locations in the same region that we didn't start excavations yet, but they are, how can I say, outcropping in the floor. You can see these points and Lesmas just appearing in the sediment, in the surface, and they're exactly the same technology. When you go to Paraná State and you look at Tuna site, this is a site that has the exact chronological range of the other sites. And it also presents points, but you can see that the points are, at least in form, they're a little bit different, right? They look more like a little stars, right, in form. And you don't have the lesmas. Instead, you have these little artifacts that I'm calling them lesminas because they're similar to lesmas in shape, but in technology, they're totally different and they're quite small. And when you look to southern Brazil in the Garibaldi site, you have this site that is occupied since 11,000-year-old to the late Holocene. This is the site that you have 8,000-year occupation with no changes at all in the whole industry. And you can see that you can find these types of points. So in the left, in the left you can see what I'm calling the Garibaldiense points, which are these triangular bodies with straight stems. There are also some ones that are bifurcated, so instead of being straight, you have like a big convexity here. Sorry, convexity, not convexity, but concavity here in the bottom of the stem. In the center, in the bottom, you can see an example of the unstemmed point made of agate. And in the right, you can see some examples of what I'm calling the Montenegro points, which are these points with a very long blade or body. It is always serrated, and the stem is always bifurcated. And this is the only type of point that is technologically standard, systematically standard. It's always made in the same way by pressure, and you start the pressure bifacially from the extremities, so from the tip and from the stem, and you finish this in the middle of the body of the blade, always like this. It's very systematic. It's not the same thing with the other points, because the other points you can see bifacial generic reduction. I'm calling generic, but I could identify at least 3 types of bifacial reduction in these points. And if you look to the middle again, the points of the top, you can see that that point is just a flake that is a natural thing. And afterwards, it was retouched just to give the shape of the point, the same shape of the other ones. So technologically different. Well, I analyzed almost 400 of these points from all these sites, and this analysis checked 31 attributes, which are metric measurements, the morphology, technology, and diachrony. All of this was checked out. After this, I made some statistic evaluation, statistic tests, that's rotative frequency and multivariate tests. You can see the name of these ones there. And basically what I found out by statistic analysis is that there are at least 3 different technological standards in the sites that were previously called Umbu Tradition. So instead of verifying that Umbu Tradition is actually a real thing, I found out that we have at least 3 different ways of making points in that coverage area in the same period. So I could find that this is a table with the different attributes and the different results of each one. But in some, before talking about the final results, I also made some experimental replication of those points. So you can see in the top some examples of the Rioclarense points and the Lesmas in the bottom. And in the left at the bottom, some examples of Garibaldiense points that I also made. All of this just to reinforce how different they are technologically. I use the same local raw materials because I visited locations and collected raw material. And I used imitative percussion and pressure tools. So I used round pebbles and antlers, which is what we know that they were using in these places, because in the assemblage we can find the tools that we're using to nap and pressure. So basically, the Rioclarense Industry presents Lesmas, and those points I already described to you. They're always made of local flame. They have the oval stem, bifacial reduction, and at least two types of reduction with large and selective negative, this is A, and parallel negative shaping a vertical rib in the center of the point, this is B. You have the Tunas Industry, where you have bladelet cores, and you can see the 3637B piece. This is the blade core, the bladelet core, an example. You have the Lesmas, you don't have them here, but you saw it before in the pictures. And you have the star points that are always made of exogenous flint. They have bifurcated stem, they're bifacial reducted, and they're always very small, less than 36 millimeters. They're the smallest Paleoindian points we find in Brazil, and they're always made by the same type of reduction with convergent negatives. And finally, you have the Garibaldiense Industry, that you have these different types of points. They have the Garibaldiense points, which are always made of local silicified sandstone, but you can also find some made of basalt and agate. You can also see that they always have the straight or bifurcated stem, and they're always made by bifacial reduction, or sometimes no reduction at all, just retouch. So there are at least 4 negative organization types, the one that have no reduction at all, this is D, and 3 other ones, the A, B, C. There are 3 different types of reduction. If you have any questions about what are those types, I can explain more specifically in the discussion. And you have the Montenegro points that are always this blade, triangle, body shape, bifurcate stem, bifacial parallel reduction by pressure, and as I told you before, systematic diachrony. They're always made from the extremities to the middle. Conclusion. The Umbu tradition hypothesis is not valid, and lithics assemblies should not be associated to it. Instead, we should look for more regional or chronological differences in order to associate lithic assemblages that were previously associated to the Umbu tradition to other traditions. And when I say other industries, I'm talking about associating these new assemblages that are going to be studied to these same industries identified or other ones that have not been identified before. So this is an under construction model. As you can see in this map, this is what we know now for the late Paleoindian period in Brazil. You can see the Itaparica Tradition, which we still need a little bit more research before saying that this is actually valid. We have identified the Lagoassantense Industry there in central Brazil. You can see the black spot. You have the Rioclarense, the Tunas, and the Garibaldiense industries. And I'm not associating all these areas just because one or two sites. We have done research on literature to look for artifacts that are very similar to these industries, and some of them check out in the same regions. Still, we need more research to verify if this valid as well. And you can see the question points that are loose in the map. Those are places that we know that we have old Paleoindian sites with stemmed points or early masses, but they have never been studied yet. And we still hope to study these places in the near future and try to understand how are they related to these industries or if they have belonged to any other cultural unities in that period. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you, Otis, for giving us the opportunity to present this in an online way for all of us. Thank you very much.